The Vorthan Empire had been conquering star systems for over 50 years. Their massive warships moved through space like hungry wolves, destroying everything in their path. Admiral Krex stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking at the star chart spread before him. 17 different alien civilizations had fallen to his fleet. Some had tried to fight back, but none had lasted more than a few weeks. "Admiral," his second-in-command called out, "our long-range sensors are picking up something strange." Krex walked over to the scanning station. On the screen, he could see energy readings unlike anything they had encountered before. The signals were coming from a region of space that most species avoided. The galactic maps marked it as a quarantine zone, but nobody seemed to remember exactly why. "What do we know about this area?" Krex asked. His intelligence officer pulled up the files. "The records are old, sir. Something about humans living there. But that was over 200 years ago. Most experts believe they either destroyed themselves in civil wars or simply died out from disease." Krex had heard stories about humans from the old veterans. They said humans were violent and unpredictable, but also primitive compared to the advanced races of the galaxy. If they still existed at all, they would be easy prey for the Vorthan fleet. "Prepare the fleet for advance," Krex ordered. "If there are resources in that region, I want them." 50 massive dreadnoughts began moving toward human space. Each ship was 3 kilometers long and packed with enough firepower to level entire cities. The Vorthan military had perfected the art of quick conquest. They would appear without warning, destroy all defenses, and strip the conquered worlds of anything valuable. As they crossed into what the maps called human territory, Krex expected immediate contact. Most civilizations had early warning systems that would detect his fleet from light years away. But his communications officer reported nothing. No challenges, no diplomatic messages, no panicked evacuation signals. "Maybe they really are all dead," his weapons officer suggested. The first world they approached looked peaceful. Green continents, blue oceans, and small cities scattered across the surface. The orbital defenses were laughably weak, just a few outdated missile platforms that his ships destroyed without even slowing down. "Begin planetary bombardment," Krex commanded. The attack lasted only 3 hours. The small farming communities had no way to fight back against weapons that could crack mountains. When it was over, the planet was silent and burning. But as they moved deeper into human space, strange things began happening. Landing parties sent to secure resources on empty planets would simply vanish. The soldiers would check in every hour as ordered, and then suddenly stop responding. When rescue teams went to investigate, they found nothing. No bodies, no signs of fighting, no clues about what had happened. "Sir, we've lost contact with the scouting party on the fourth moon of Kepler 442, reported his communications officer. "That's the 6th team to go missing this week." Krex studied the reports. The missing soldiers were all experienced veterans who had fought in dozens of campaigns. They weren't the type to get scared and run away, and they certainly weren't careless enough to get killed by primitive humans armed with basic weapons. "What about our sensor readings?" he asked his scanning officer. "That's the strange part, sir. Our instruments show the planets are mostly empty. Small populations, no major cities, no industrial complexes. But the energy signatures we're detecting don't match what we're seeing." Ships in the fleet started reporting ghost contacts on their sensors. Objects would appear on the screens for a few seconds, then disappear completely. When Krex ordered his captains to investigate, they found nothing but empty space. The most disturbing reports came from his patrol ships. Captains would swear they saw other vessels moving in the darkness between stars, but when they tried to get closer, there was nothing there. Some reported feeling like they were being watched, even when their instruments showed they were completely alone. "Admiral," his intelligence officer said quietly, "I've been reviewing the old records about humans more carefully. The stories about their wars, they're not what we thought." "Explain." "According to these files, humans didn't lose their early conflicts with other species. They won them. Decisively. But then they just disappeared. Retreated into their own space and cut off all contact with the outside galaxy." Krex felt a cold chill run down his spine. If the humans had been powerful enough to defeat other spacefaring races 2 centuries ago, what had they been doing with all that time? "Sir." The communications officer's voice was sharp with panic. "We're receiving a transmission. Origin unknown." "Put it through." The voice that filled the bridge was calm and human. It spoke in perfect Vorthan, which should have been impossible since humans supposedly had no contact with the outside galaxy. "Attention Vorthan fleet. You have entered human space without permission and committed acts of war against our colonies. You have one chance to leave immediately. Continue your advance, and we will consider your entire fleet a threat that must be eliminated. Krex laughed. One chance? We have 50 of the most powerful warships in the galaxy. What could a handful of primitive humans possibly do to stop us? The transmission ended without another word. That night, 3 more dreadnoughts simply vanished from the fleet formation. No explosions, no distress calls, no debris. They were there one moment and gone the next, as if they had never existed at all. For the first time in his long military career, Admiral Krex began to wonder if he had made a terrible mistake. Captain Emily Clark was having breakfast in her quarters when the emergency alarm began blaring throughout the ship. She dropped her coffee cup and ran to the bridge of the UTS Retribution, still wearing her sleeping clothes. The ship was humanity's most advanced stealth carrier, invisible to almost every known scanning system in the galaxy. "Report," she shouted as she entered the command center. Lieutenant David Brown, her communications officer, looked pale as he turned to face her. "Captain, we just received the final transmission from New Bristol Colony. The Vorthan fleet hit them 40 minutes ago." Clark felt her stomach drop. New Bristol was home to over 3 million people, including her younger brother and his family. "Show me." The main screen lit up with shaky footage from the colony's emergency broadcast system. Clark watched in horror as massive alien ships rained fire down on cities full of innocent people. The camera shook as explosions rocked the ground nearby. She could see families running with small children, trying to find shelter that didn't exist. "They're targeting the evacuation centers," Brown said quietly. "The aliens are deliberately killing civilians who were trying to escape." Clark's hands clenched into fists. The footage showed Vorthan soldiers walking through the ruins of a school, shooting anyone they found still alive. These weren't military targets or strategic locations. This was pure murder. Her tactical officer called out, "Fleet Command is sending us priority orders." Clark forced herself to look away from the terrible images on screen. "What are our instructions?" "Operation Nemesis is now active. All human fleets are authorized to use Omega-level response protocols. No restrictions, no limits on weapons or tactics." Every person on the bridge went completely silent. Omega-level protocols hadn't been used in over 200 years, not since the last time an alien race had tried to wipe out human colonies. Most people in the galaxy had forgotten what happened to species that chose to make war on humanity. "Captain," her weapons officer said carefully, "Fleet Command is also ordering all ships to decloak and prepare for full combat operations." Clark nodded slowly. For 2 centuries, humans had stayed hidden in their corner of space. They had let the galaxy forget about them, assumed they were weak or dead. During that time, humanity had been building, learning, and preparing for the day when someone would be stupid enough to attack them again. "Send a message to all department heads," she ordered. "Full battle stations. Begin launching the Phantom fighters. And contact Captain Reed on the Invisible Hand. Tell him it's time to show these aliens why nobody comes into human space uninvited." Across human territory, dozens of ships just like the Retribution began appearing out of nowhere. They had been watching the Vorthan fleet since it first crossed the border, staying invisible and gathering intelligence. The aliens thought they were hunting defenseless colonies, but they had actually walked into a trap. Clark walked to her command chair and activated the fleet communication system. On her screens, she could see the faces of 30 other ship captains, all waiting for orders. Some of them looked angry, others looked sad, but all of them looked determined. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "you've all seen what happened to New Bristol. These aliens came into our space and murdered our people. They killed children. They destroyed evacuation centers. They think we're weak." She paused and looked at each face on the screen. "They're about to learn how wrong they are. For 200 years, we've been preparing for this moment. We've built ships they can't see, weapons they can't understand, and tactics they can't predict. Today, we remind the galaxy why human space stays human." Captain James Reed of the Invisible Hand spoke up. "What are our rules of engagement, Captain?" "There are no rules," Clark replied. "These aliens chose to make this a war of extermination. They forfeited any right to mercy when they started killing civilians. Every Vorthan ship that entered our space is now a target. None of them go home." The other captains nodded in understanding. This wasn't just about stopping an invasion. This was about sending a message to the entire galaxy that would prevent future attacks on human colonies. "Begin Phase 1, Clark ordered. "I want their scouts and patrol ships eliminated first. Make it look like accidents or equipment failures. Let them think they're just having bad luck. Over the next 6 hours, Vorthan ships began disappearing one by one. A patrol cruiser would report engine problems and then go silent forever. A scouting vessel would investigate an asteroid field and never come out. To the Vorthan admiral, it looked like his fleet was suffering from mechanical failures and navigation errors. But Clark and her fellow captains knew the truth. Human ships were moving through space like ghosts, striking without warning and vanishing before the enemy could respond. Each attack was planned perfectly, designed to look like an accident or system malfunction. "Captain," her scanning officer reported, "the main Vorthan fleet is starting to group together. I think they're getting suspicious." Clark smiled grimly. "Good. Let them bunch up. It'll make Phase 2 easier." She opened a secure channel to Admiral James Mitchell, the overall commander of human forces in this sector. "Admiral, this is Clark. We've eliminated 12 enemy ships without them realizing they are under attack. Requesting permission to move to direct engagement." Mitchell's voice came through clearly. "Permission granted, Captain. Show them what happens when someone threatens our families." Clark turned to her crew. "All hands, this is the captain. We're about to decloak and engage the enemy directly. Remember, these aliens chose to kill our people. They chose to make this fight. Now we're going to show them what a real fight looks like." The Retribution stealth systems powered down, and for the first time in decades, a human warship became visible to enemy sensors. Around the galaxy, similar ships were doing the same thing, preparing to teach the Vorthan Empire a lesson they would never forget. Admiral Krex stared at his tactical display with growing fear. In the past 12 hours, 8 more of his dreadnoughts had simply vanished from space. His fleet commanders were reporting the same thing over and over. Ships would be there one moment, responding to communications and following orders, then they would just disappear completely. "Sir, the destroyer Vexthal just went silent," his communications officer reported, his voice shaking. "They were investigating an asteroid field in Sector 7. We lost all contact 3 minutes ago." Krex walked to the main viewing window of his flagship. Outside, he could see the remaining ships of his once mighty fleet. What had started as 50 proud warships was now down to 37 vessels, and he had no idea what was killing them. "Have we found any debris? Any wreckage at all?" he demanded. His tactical officer shook his head. "Nothing, sir. It's like the ships are just being erased from existence. No explosion signatures, no energy discharges, no distress signals. They're just gone." The worst part was that his sensors showed absolutely nothing threatening in the area. According to every instrument on his ship, they were alone in empty space. But Krex knew they were being hunted by something invisible and deadly. "Admiral," his scanning officer called out, "I'm detecting a new contact. Single vessel, bearing directly toward us." Krex rushed to the scanner station. On the screen, he could see a ship approaching their position. It was smaller than his dreadnoughts, sleek and black, with a design unlike anything in his databases. "Finally," he growled. "A target we can actually see. All ships, prepare to engage." The human vessel continued its steady approach, making no effort to hide or run away. It seemed almost casual, as if it was taking a peaceful stroll through space instead of facing 50 heavily armed warships. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the unknown vessel," his communications officer announced. "Put it through." The voice that filled the bridge was calm and human, speaking perfect Vorthan with a slight accent. "This is Admiral James Mitchell of the United Terran Navy. You have entered human space without permission and committed acts of genocide against our colonies. Under the Terran Defense Doctrine, your entire fleet is now considered a clear and present threat to humanity's survival." Krex laughed harshly. "One small ship against my entire fleet? You humans are even more foolish than I thought." Mitchell's voice remained completely calm. "You have one opportunity to surrender unconditionally. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. You have 30 seconds to comply." "Surrender?" Krex shouted. "I have 37 dreadnoughts. You have one tiny ship. All vessels, open fire on that human vessel immediately." Every gun in the Vorthan fleet turned toward the single human ship and fired at once. Hundreds of energy beams and missiles streaked through space, enough firepower to destroy an entire city. But when the light faded, the human ship was gone. "Where did it go?" Krex demanded. "Unknown, sir. It just vanished. Like it was never there." Suddenly, alarms began screaming throughout the fleet. On Krex's tactical display, He watched in horror as 3 of his dreadnoughts exploded simultaneously. The ships didn't just get damaged or disabled, they were completely destroyed, torn apart by weapons that seemed to bend space itself. Sir, the Ravager is reporting massive hull breaches. They say something invisible is cutting through their armor like it's made of paper. Another ship exploded, then another. Krex could see the blasts of light in space, but he couldn't see what was causing them. His fleet was being destroyed by enemies he couldn't even detect. All ships, scatter formation. Take evasive action, he ordered, but it was too late. The human vessels, and now Krex realized there had to be multiple ships, all invisible to his senses, moved through his fleet like deadly ghosts. They would appear just long enough to fire their impossible weapons, then vanish again before his gunners could target them. Admiral, his tactical officer said, his voice barely a whisper, we've lost 12 ships in the last 4 minutes. Whatever weapons they're using, our shields can't stop them. Krex watched his proud fleet being dismantled piece by piece. Ships that had conquered star systems and defeated entire civilizations were being destroyed like they were made of cardboard. The humans weren't just fighting them, they were playing with them, demonstrating a level of technological superiority that made the Vorthan Empire look like children with toy weapons. Sir, the human admiral is transmitting again. Mitchell's voice returned, still calm and controlled. Your empire sent 50 dreadnoughts into our space. You murdered 3 million innocent people on New Bristol. You thought humanity would be easy prey because we've been quiet for 200 years. Another Vorthan ship exploded, its hull splitting open and spilling atmosphere and bodies into the vacuum of space. You made a mistake, Mitchell continued. We weren't hiding because we were weak. We were preparing. For 2 centuries, we've been building ships you can't see, developing weapons you can't defend against, and planning for the day when someone would be stupid enough to attack us again. Krex realized with growing terror that his fleet was doomed. These humans weren't just more advanced than his people, they were so far ahead technologically that this wasn't even a real fight. It was an execution. What do you want? He finally asked, his voice barely audible. We want your empire to remember this day, Mitchell replied. We want them to wonder what happened to your fleet. And when they send a larger force to investigate, we want them to discover that we've been preparing for that moment too. As if to emphasize his point, 3 more Vorthan ships simply ceased to exist, erased from space by weapons that defied every law of physics Krex thought he understood. For the first time in his military career, Admiral Krex understood what it felt like to be truly helpless. Captain Emily Clark watched from the bridge of the Retribution as the remaining Vorthan ships tried desperately to escape. The aliens had finally understood they were fighting an enemy they couldn't defeat, but it was far too late to run. Her tactical display showed 23 enemy vessels scattered across the star system, each one trying to flee in a different direction. Captain, her weapons officer reported, the enemy ships are attempting to jump to hyperspace. Should we let them go? Negative, Clark replied firmly. Admiral Mitchell's orders were clear. None of them leave this system alive. The Vorthan Empire had built their reputation on overwhelming force and brutal efficiency. They would arrive at a planet with massive fleets, destroy all resistance quickly, and move on to the next target. It was a simple strategy that had worked for decades against other species. But they had never faced an enemy that could turn their own strengths into weaknesses. Human ships moved through space like hunting wolves, coordinating their attacks with precision that seemed impossible. When the Vorthans tried to group together for protection, human vessels would appear from multiple directions at once, forcing them to split their fire and weaken their defenses. When they tried to scatter and escape, the humans would herd them like sheep, cutting off escape routes and driving them exactly where they wanted them to go. The enemy flagship is trying to signal the rest of their fleet, Lieutenant Brown announced from his communications station. Clark smiled coldly. Let them talk. It won't help them. Admiral Krex's voice crackled over the intercepted transmission, filled with panic and desperation. All ships, form defensive positions around the Dominion. Concentrate all firepower on any targets you can see. These humans can't be everywhere at once. But the humans could be everywhere at once, or at least they appeared to be. Captain Reed's ship, the Invisible Hand, materialized directly behind the Vorthan flagship and fired a single shot that tore through the rear shields like they weren't even there. Before Krex's gunners could return fire, Reed's ship had vanished again. At the same time, Captain Williams in the Shadow Strike appeared above a group of 3 Vorthan cruisers. Her ship's weapons didn't just damage the enemy vessels, they seemed to reach inside the ships themselves, causing explosions that started deep within the hulls and worked their way outward. How are they doing that? Krex's voice could be heard shouting over the radio. Our shields are still active. How are their weapons getting through? Clark knew the answer, but she wasn't about to explain it to the enemy. Human technology had advanced far beyond what most species thought possible. Their weapons didn't need to break through shields, they could phase through them, targeting the ship's internal systems directly. It was like trying to defend against ghosts that could reach through walls. "Captain," her scanning officer called out, "I'm detecting gravitational distortions in Sector 4. It looks like Admiral Mitchell is setting up the gravity trap." Clark nodded with satisfaction. This was the part of the plan she had been waiting for. The humans weren't just destroying the Vorthan fleet ship by ship, they were herding the survivors into a specific area of space that looked completely empty to enemy sensors. "Signal all ships," she ordered. "Begin the final phase. Drive the remaining vessels toward the trap zone." Human ships began appearing all around the scattered Vorthan forces, not to attack, but simply to be seen. Every time a Vorthan captain tried to flee in one direction, a human vessel would decloak in front of them, forcing them to turn away. Slowly but steadily, the surviving alien ships were pushed together into what appeared to be open, safe space. Admiral Krex seemed to realize what was happening. "It's a trap," his voice screamed over the radio. "They're hurting us. All ships, scatter in all directions. Don't let them push you towards Sector 4. But it was too late. The moment the Vorthan ships tried to scatter again, Admiral Mitchell's flagship appeared directly in front of them. The massive human vessel was unlike anything Krex had seen before, sleek and deadly, covered in weapons that seemed to shimmer with their own inner light. "Admiral Krex," Mitchell's calm voice filled the communications channels, "you wanted to see human space. Let me show you one of our more interesting developments." Space itself seemed to twist around the trapped Vorthan ships. Invisible forces grabbed the alien vessels and held them in place, no matter how hard their engines strained to break free. The humans had somehow learned to create artificial gravity wells, turning empty space into an inescapable prison. "Impossible," Krex whispered, his voice barely audible over the radio. "You can't control gravity. No species has that technology." "No species except humans," Mitchell replied. "We've had 200 years to think about warfare, Admiral. 2 centuries to develop new ways to protect our people from threats like you." As the Vorthan ships struggled helplessly against forces they couldn't understand, human vessels emerged from stealth all around them. Dozens of sleek, deadly ships that had been invisible moments before now filled the space around the gravity trap. "Your empire sent 50 dreadnoughts to murder our civilians," Mitchell continued, his voice echoing across all frequencies. "You thought we would be easy targets because we've been quiet for so long. You were wrong. We weren't hiding, we were preparing." Clark watched as the last of the Vorthan resistance crumbled. The alien ships were powerful, but they had been designed to fight enemies who used similar technology and tactics. Against humans who could bend the laws of physics and appear from nowhere, they were helpless. "This is what happens," Mitchell's voice concluded, "when someone forgets why human space remains human." The final phase of the battle was about to begin, and Clark knew that none of the Vorthan ships would survive to tell their empire what they had learned. The space where Admiral Krex's mighty fleet had once sailed was now filled with nothing but twisted metal and floating debris. 50 proud Vorthan dreadnoughts had been reduced to scattered wreckage that drifted silently through the void. The battle was over, and humanity had won so completely that it seemed like the alien invasion had never really been a threat at all. Admiral James Mitchell stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching his crews finish their work. Human ships moved through the debris field like efficient cleaners, making sure no useful technology fell into the wrong hands. Everything that could be salvaged would be studied, and everything else would be destroyed completely. "Sir," Captain Clark's voice came through the communication system, "we've completed our sweep of the area. All enemy vessels have been eliminated except for one." Mitchell nodded slowly. The exception had been planned from the beginning. A single Vorthan scout ship hung motionless in space, its weapons disabled and its crew very much alive. The small vessel looked pathetic next to the massive human warships that surrounded it, but it would serve a very important purpose. "Have we finished recording everything?" Mitchell asked his intelligence officer. "Yes, sir. We've documented the entire battle from multiple angles. The recordings show our weapons, our tactics, and the complete destruction of the Vorthan fleet. We've also included footage of what they did to New Bristol Colony." Mitchell walked to his command chair and activated the communication system. On the main screen, he could see the terrified face of the surviving Vorthan captain. The alien's eyes were wide with shock and fear, and his hands were shaking as he tried to operate his ship's controls. "Captain Vex," Mitchell said calmly, I want you to listen very carefully. You are the only survivor of your fleet. Your ship has been repaired just enough to make the journey home. In your computer systems, you'll find complete recordings of what happened here today. The Vorthan captain tried to speak, but no words came out. He had watched his entire fleet get destroyed by weapons that seemed like magic and tactics that defied everything he thought he knew about warfare. When you return to your empire, Mitchell continued, you will show these recordings to your leaders. You will tell them exactly what you saw here. You will explain that 50 of your most powerful warships were destroyed by a human fleet that they never even saw coming. Captain Vex finally found his voice. Why are you letting me live? Why not just kill me like the others? Mitchell's expression remained completely neutral. Because dead men can't deliver messages. Your empire needs to understand what happened here. They need to know that human space is protected by forces they can't comprehend or defeat. The recordings that would travel back with the scout ship told a story that would terrify anyone who saw them. They showed human ships appearing from nowhere, weapons that could phase through shields, and technology that could control the basic forces of nature. But more importantly, they showed the methodical, calculated way that humans had planned and executed the destruction of an entire invasion fleet. Your people made a mistake, Mitchell explained. They assumed that because we've been quiet for 200 years, we must be weak or dead. They thought human space would be an easy conquest. They were wrong on every level. Captain Clark's ship, the Retribution, moved closer to the crippled scout vessel. Through the viewing ports, Captain Vex could see human crew members going about their duties with calm efficiency. These weren't warriors drunk on victory or soldiers celebrating a hard-fought battle. They were professionals who had just completed a routine operation. The recordings will show your leaders something else, Mitchell continued. They'll show that we could have destroyed your entire fleet in the first hour of combat if we had wanted to. Instead, we chose to take our time, to demonstrate our capabilities slowly and clearly. We wanted your surviving crew member to understand exactly how outmatched you were. The truth was even more frightening than Captain Vex realized. The human fleet that had destroyed his people represented only a tiny fraction of humanity's actual military power. For 2 centuries, humans had been building ships, developing weapons, and training crews in preparation for exactly this kind of situation. What he had witnessed was just a small sample of what waited in the depths of human space. Sir, the human admiral's communications officer announced, we're receiving reports from other sectors. Similar Vorthan scouting fleets have been detected approaching human territory. Mitchell smiled grimly. How many? 3 separate fleets, sir. Each one roughly the same size as the force we just eliminated. Perfect. Signal Admiral Parker and Admiral Chen. Tell them to handle their guests with the same level of hospitality we've shown here. Captain Vex listened to this exchange with growing horror. His fleet hadn't been the only invasion force. The Vorthan Empire had sent multiple attack groups, all of them confident that they could overwhelm human defenses through sheer numbers. Now he realized that each of those fleets was walking into the same trap his people had fallen into. Your empire is about to learn a very important lesson, Mitchell told the surviving Vorthan captain. Human space belongs to humans. We've been quiet for 2 centuries not because we're weak, but because we've been preparing for visitors like you. The scout ship's engines flickered to life as human technicians finished their repairs. Captain Vex would make it home, but he would carry with him recordings that would change how the galaxy viewed humanity forever. Go home, Mitchell commanded. Show your leaders what happens when someone enters human space uninvited. And remember this, what you saw today was us being merciful. If your empire is foolish enough to send another invasion fleet, we won't bother leaving survivors to carry messages. The small Vorthan ship began its long journey home, carrying with it the proof that humanity was no longer the weak, primitive species the galaxy remembered. The message was simple and terrifying: human space remained human, and anyone who forgot that lesson would not live to regret their mistake.